saying that the civilian government has always supported the army, but the big question remains, is this an uneasy temporary truce?
देखें, ये बताएं कि हम कब फौज के साथ नहीं खड़े रहे। पहले हमेशा हमने साथ दिया है, मगर जहां रूल्स ऑफ बिजनेस की बात होगी तो वहां वायलेशन नहीं होनी चाहिए। आई वॉज शॉक्ड टू हियर the comments of the Chief Justice of Pakistan that I am a dishonest man. जमहूरियत मुल्क में रहेगी और जमहूरियत डेस्टिनी है पाकिस्तान के लिए, वो इसकी डेस्टिनी बन चुकी है and all idaras would be working under the civil government.
Let's take a look at that ISI statement which escalated the row and said there can be no allegation more serious than what the Honourable Prime Minister has levelled against the Army Chief and staff and the DG ISI. Now this has very serious ramifications with potentially grievous consequences for the country. Now, that statement was in response to what Prime Minister Gilani told a Chinese daily earlier in the week, that the Army and the ISI chief's submissions to the Supreme Court on the Memo Gate issue were unlawful. Now, the Army and the civilian administration have been at each other's throats over the secret memo that was sent to the US government after the raid on Osama bin Laden, asking for help to ward off any army takeover in Pakistan. Now, the matter is now before the country's Supreme Court, and Gilani was upset with an affidavit submitted by Defence Secretary Khalid Naeem Lodi, which said the civilian government had no control of the operational matters of the Army and the ISI. Gilani responded by saying it was unacceptable for the Army to act like a state within a state.
लेकिन अनकॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल मूव जो भी होगी वो गलत होगी, वो मुल्क को इंस्टेबिलिटी की तरफ लेके जाएगी, वो मुल्क में और ज्यादा मसाइल पैदा करेगी। पाकिस्तान तो और बहुत सारे मसाइल से पहले ही शिकार है। पाकिस्तान, मुझे ये लगता है कि शायद अल्लाह ना करे इस तरह की कैफियत हो कि अगर कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन को फॉलो ना किया गया तो यहाँ पे सिचुएशन बहुत बुरी हो जाएगी।
मैं तो ये समझता हूँ कि डेमोक्रेसी बिल्कुल हर हाल में रहनी चाहिए, लेकिन जो मौजूदा सूरत हाल चल रही है गवर्नमेंट के दरमियान और अदलिया के दरमियान, तो बेहतर है कि गवर्नमेंट अपनी जो है रिजाइन कर दे और किसी दूसरी गवर्नमेंट को आने का मौका दे।
चीफ जस्टिस साहब बहुत अच्छे आदमी हैं। चीफ जस्टिस का काम नहीं है लोगों को गर्दन से पकड़ के उतारना। हाँ, चीफ जस्टिस साहब एक काम कर सकते हैं, चीफ जस्टिस साहब फौज को ऑर्डर दे सकते हैं कि इस करप्ट हुकूमत को कानून से पकड़ के किक आउट करें।
तो आर्मी को आगे डिमोरलाइज किया जा रहा है और जो अमेरिका भी जो चाह रहा है, जिस तरह बड़ी कुफ्ते चाह रही है कि हमारी फौज को डिमोरलाइज किया जाए, मेरा नहीं ख्याल है कि आर्मी कैसे को टेक ओवर करेगी और ये थ्रू सुप्रीम कोर्ट का जो फैसला है उसी के तहत ही सारा कुछ होगा।
Amid the turmoil created by the rising tensions between the military establishment and the civilian government, an emergency session of Parliament has been called today to discuss a warning from the Supreme Court that action could be taken against the President and Prime Minister for failing to reopen high-profile corruption cases. Now, there were several cases against President Zardari himself. Well, the other story is that we are tracking in less than an hour from now, thousands of students in Madhya Pradesh will perform the Surya Namaskar, attempting a world record. Now, but Muslim leaders have issued a fatwa against the event. They've termed the move as un-Islamic and equated it to idol worship prohibited in Islam. Now, the school education department, though, has made elaborate arrangements to ensure maximum participation in the Surya Namaskar exercise, so a world record can be created by registering the feat in the Guinness Book of World Records. Well, in what can be termed as the most horrific case of medical negligence, an elderly paralyzed man at a government hospital in Jodhpur has been bitten by rats. Worse, the patient was in the intensive care unit and on life support systems, leading to serious worries over his condition. Now, the Rajasthan government has initiated a probe and promises tough action against all hospital authorities guilty of negligence in the shocking case.
Iqbal's struggle for survival has now become a lot tougher. With a blood clot in his brain, he's been in the ICU of Jodhpur's MDM hospital for over 2 months. And after rats nibbled at his ears, nose, lips and cheeks on Tuesday night, his condition has worsened, leaving many here shaken at this horrific negligence.
ICU में अगर कोई चूहा किसी व्यक्ति को अगर काट ले तो एक आम वार्ड की बात क्या करें। अगर ICU में अगर किसी चूहे ने जाके काट सकता है तो कोई आम पब्लिक अगर कहीं पे कोई सो रहा है तो उसकी हालत कैसी हो सकती है?
What makes matters worse is that while his body was being nibbled by rats, none of the medical staff in the ICU even noticed the rodent attack, which had damaged even the patient's ventilator tubes. Ultimately, it was the patient's daughter who raised an alarm after noticing bloodstains and scratches on her father's face. But now the government promises action against the guilty.
But let me assure you, whether it's the junior staff, the senior staff, the senior-most staff, if anybody is found responsible for this incident, and shocking incident, I would say, we'll take severe action against them.
But this isn't the first time that rats have attacked patients in Jodhpur's government hospitals. A few years ago, an infant was attacked by rodents in the Um-E hospital. And doctors say they will now seek professional help to do away with the rodent menace that's crippling government healthcare facilities in Jodhpur. With Jayvyas in Jodhpur, Rajan Mahan for NDTV.
Of course, a lot of reactions to that, one of horror and shock from across the nation. Let's go across to Rajan Mahan. Rajan, I'm just assuming that a lot of the patients in the hospital just want to leave.
Yes, indeed. I mean, this horrific incident of negligence has indeed caused deep anger, anguish among lots and lots of citizens and patients and their relatives in Rajasthan. In fact, I am joined here now by two concerned citizens of Jaipur. Let's talk to them and find out how people are reacting to the story. Ma'am, tell us, a 70-year-old man paralyzed and in ICU and getting bitten by rats. How do you react?
Actually, it's very, very shocking. And one has a sense of utter disbelief. I think our animal clinics are in a better condition than these human hospitals. I mean, can you imagine rats nibbling at a 70-year-old patient in the ICU? That's horrifying.
It's really horrifying. So, I mean, this is not a one-off. We've earlier also seen incidents of negligence in government hospitals. What has been your experience? And does this kind of incident actually, reduce your trust in going over for treatment in government hospitals?
See, unfortunately, the experience at most government hospitals have been consistently uncomfortable. So what is happening, the common citizen is increasingly going to the private sector for treatment, which is very, very expensive, but there is no recourse at government hospitals. And come to think of it, the rats are taking more intensive care of the patients than the doctors and nurses. So where does the common man go? What kind of hope does he have, which is affordable health care?
So in future, would you guys like to actually go to any government hospital? Does this kind of an incident actually reduce your trust in the government?
No, I'm very angry. I think the doctors and the nurses should be taking more care in the ICU, especially in the ICU.
Would you like to take your kids to government hospitals or just trust on me?
Perhaps not, unless something very drastic is done and very, very soon.
Thanks very much for speaking to us. In Rajasthan, and it will take a lot for people's dented confidence to be restored in government hospitals in the state.
Absolutely, Rajan. On one hand, we're talking about those expensive private hospitals. On the other hand, you're looking at, the government hospitals. And if this is what you'd get out there, as the man correctly explained, the rats took more intensive care of the patient out there than the hospital authorities themselves. Rajan, thanks very much for joining us. Now, as poll-bound states get into election mode, parties are actually fighting out and quite literally tussle between the ruling Shiromani Akali Dal and the Congress workers at the Alpura Bhai village turned violent. 4 vehicles were smashed and many rounds were fired in the air, creating tension in the village and surrounding areas. The local MLA accused the police of coming late to the village despite intimation. Now, later the CRPF had to be deployed to control the situation. The Supreme Court is likely to deliver its verdict in the hit-and-run case by Mumbai businessman Alistair Anthony Pereira. An allegedly drunk Pereira lost control of his car and drove it over people sleeping by the roadside in November 2006. Now, 7 construction workers were killed and 8 others injured. The trial court had let off Pereira with a nominal 6-month sentence, which led to a huge public outrage. The Bombay High Court then on its own examined the judgment and enhanced the jail term to 3 years. Now, convicting him of charges of unintentional killing. Pereira challenged his conviction in the Supreme Court in 2007.